Hey, I wanted to do a video on hoping that I will be helping with some of the problems that arise between foreigner Filipina relationships, marriage. Okay, let's take it that it's going to be married, because for a start off, marriage is very important to a Filipina, because it means that the man is committed and not a sex tourist or here for a couple of years and then to shoot off and forget all about it. Okay, funnily enough, while we're talking about it, having a mixed child is not a problem. I used to read about the aftermath of the Vietnam War, where the Americans had gone over there, Americans and other countries had sent their troops over to Vietnam, but they had managed in the cities where there were prostitutes or women which by circumstance were willing to have a relationship with an American soldier, and when they left, the US at that time wouldn't allow them to bring their Vietnamese wife, whether common law or real. Well, they wouldn't allow the Americans to marry a Vietnamese. So there were children left behind, and those children suffered for being part American, part because it was born of enemies, in the same way that women who had relationships with German prisoners and Italian prisoners that had been taken to the UK during the Second World War. So it wasn't a new problem. But in the Philippines, that problem just doesn't exist, because anybody who has a mixed race child is considered very, very lucky, because I think to a certain extent it's because there's some kind of genetic agreement that happens between a Filipina and almost any white. No, I can't even say it's all white, because it doesn't work out that way. It seems like any other race who has a child with a Filipina will have a gorgeous child, male or female. They'll be handsome or beautiful. So that doesn't exist as a problem. Whether the child is supported should the two people break up is another thing, but that's on a yes and no basis, you know. It can happen and it may not happen, so we can't deal with that. It's an unknown. Plus, it's already gone into an area where probably relations between the two people are really not very good. So we'll leave that one out. But the culture gap problems that come up from language. Now, you wouldn't think that this was a huge problem, but after 7 going on 8 years of being here, one thing you couldn't accuse me of is being a fast learner. And I haven't done anything serious. I haven't committed to learning Visayan. Now, for a long time I sat on the fence and said, well, I'm just not quite sure whether I should learn Tagalog or Visayan. And that is a problem. If you learn Visayan and you're living in Bohol, I live in Bohol, we live in Bohol, so Visayan is the language. That's what my mother-in-law speaks. That's what my extended family all speak in Visayan. They know Tagalog, but they're really not that familiar with it and wouldn't be at ease talking using Tagalog. So what does that leave us? Why would you learn Tagalog? Well, if you watch television and you would like to keep up on current affairs and know what is happening, then you would be inclined to learn Tagalog, because all of the language, or most of the language, except in the advertisements, the commercials, is in Tagalog. So there's a lot to be said for learning Tagalog. But if you want to know what's going on around you, you're going to have to learn Visayan. Now, this is where the problem is. You can operate at a very fundamental level, very basic foundational level, with no Visayan at all in basic English. Now, here's the thing: once you reach this state of thinking that you are being totally understood, then you speak freely, and you don't water it down so that you know that the person who is not speaking fluent English can understand you. Now, if I go and try to get served anywhere, yes, I'm going to be economical with my English. I'm deliberately not going to use words which I know the likelihood is that they don't understand. So I get served. So actually, for everyday basic living, simple life, I don't need to learn Visayan. Now, I've learned a few phrases. When I used to go to Taliban on the bike, and Talik, who was a little kid then, not this tall, statuesque girl that she's growing into. She was a little titchy kid, and she used to come in with me on the bike, and we'd go into Alturas and other little haunts that we had, and we would share a hallo, because we were being frugal in those days. So I used to talk to her in English all the time. You know, in the 7 or 8 years that I've been here, with all the time that I've spent with Talik, and to a slightly lesser degree, Bibi, who was a little bit more brave, Talik has never actually had a conversation with me, because she is so shy and suffers what the Filipinos call a nosebleed. When you're having a nosebleed, it means that you are not confident on your English. In fact, you're beating yourself up on it, and you're refusing to speak it as if you don't speak at all. Now, here's the thing: if you can get if you can get Filipinos over that, then you'll find that they speak actually pretty good English, though it's not fluent. It's everyday English. I wish, and my goal now, is to be able to speak everyday basic Visayan. And the reason that I finally decided that I would do that is because there's so much potential for misunderstandings that don't need to happen. The other thing is that if you don't actually speak the language, Filipinos are living in the Philippines. You're the foreigner. And when people think that Filipinos, well, if they can all speak English and it's in a group and they know you're there, it would only be good manners for them to speak English. No, it wouldn't. The good manners would come from you, from us, from me and you, in learning the language of the people that have given us a home. They've extended their hospitality. Now, I remember when I was living in California, there was actually a kind of a movement to increase awareness, and they used to call it dial 1 for English. And people were saying, I'm not dialing anything for English. This is an English-speaking country, and foreigners that come over here should learn the language. And I agreed. I used to have problems even with English. A friend of mine used to say that Americans and English people shared everything but a common language, and that was pretty accurate. Now, to get us back here, I'm the foreigner. I should be learning and let other people take responsibility for their own sins, and I'll just take it for mine. But I'm missing so much. When I go to dinner, I sit with, I counted it tonight, I sit with seven women and one male. Bachoy is eating with us now. He moved up and is at Nanai's house, and he likes it up there. So, in the Filipino way, no one's going to bother about it and say no. It would never occur to them. So, it's 7 ladies. There's Talik, Bibi, Lovely, Nanai, and now Lena is still staying with us for dinner, Vek, and Beth, and me. And that is every night for dinner. And all of the talk, especially since Lovely came, because Lovely is a talker. And so she'll be talking and people will be responding, and there's lots of laughter going on, and like a whole party that I am not party to. So this has made me think that I damn well should learn the language. The other thing is that when we go out on our projects, when problems arise and I can hear Beth dealing with them in Visayan, and I have to keep saying to Beth, what? Share it with me. Tell me some English. What is happening? And that makes it even more difficult for Beth, because she's trying to stop during a conversation and tell me. And it's usually that old gag that you ask somebody who's speaking a foreign language, after you've been listening to them talk for 10 minutes, and you say, what happened? And they say, he said no. For 10 minutes talk and exchange. And it's a little bit like that. Plus, it also has to be said, not a bash, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation, that they do not make good translators. So I remember finding this out very, very early when we went to church, and we were gathered afterwards at Timio's old house, and the blind boy who sang and played guitar was there with us, and I was interested because I wondered how he'd learned to play the guitar. How does someone say, or put your fingers like this when you can't see your fingers? So it's a different technique, and Lovely May was doing the translation, and I said to Lovely May, how does he, and then I formulated my question, and she said, I don't know. I said, well, he's sitting next to you, why don't you ask him? And it had never occurred to her. She thought I was talking to her, but a translator understands that you're not actually talking to them. What you're talking about may have nothing to do with them. You're talking to the person. And all that they are there to do is to relay as exactly as possible what you had said. And that brings us to another thing. If I am trying to say, in the case of Lovely, Lovely lived like a wild child for nearly 10 years. She looks about 6 years old, but actually she's nearly 10 years old. In February she will be 10 years old. She's actually borders on being a gifted child. I had more conversation in one ride down to the road and onto Taliban with Lovely when she had hardly been speaking English for more than a few months, intensively. And I had more conversations with her than I've had with any of my extended family. Now that tells you something about that little girl. She is clever, but she has got the usual, and I say this without criticism, she's got the usual hard-headedness that Filipinos seem to have. And so she won't learn some things, and yet others she picks up like that. So she tends to be very talkative, especially in Visayan, and people are responding to her, and I'm not in on any of it. So I gotta get on to the language thing. Plus, as I said, the whole thing of not knowing what is going on when we're in the middle of a project and we're in the middle of trying to decide whether it's okay to build a house here or should it be over there, which is what we're going through at the moment. Now, then you come down specifically to, well, what is it about the language? It's not just about what it is about the language. It's mixed in with the Philippine culture. Philippine cultural stance on communication is non-confrontational. Now, you may think, well, that just means no road rage or no fights or no heated arguments. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. It's very basic that they will avoid telling you something on the basis of they may think that it will hurt your feelings. And so, but it's not logical to a foreigner's, and I guess I'm really talking to foreigners right now. It might be something of my usual, I should get a different example, but my usual one is if you've asked your partner to make a certain phone call, say you've asked, call the bank. Right, everything, it's not so many calls here. People don't talk on the phone quite so much, my observation. Certainly we don't, because the signal is so bad that it ends up a non-conversation. But we text. So we text because that's easy. And I say, have you made the call? Did you get in touch with the bank? Yes. It's not true. They will not have made that call to the bank. But because they've forgotten and haven't made the call, they will say yes. Now that yes is based on their full intention to make the call and to make it now. So they may not be able to make it now, so it goes undone. You, in the meantime, go on the basis that the bank has been called. So your next line of question would be, and what did they say about the check? They didn't, nothing. And then there'll be some way of getting around it, and one of Beth's ways is to say, gosh, look, I think it's going to be raining today, so we better make sure that we're not out with an umbrella. Or they'll tell you again how handsome you are, or other, to try to diffuse a situation that should never have risen. Because if you had been told, if your question was, did you call the bank, and they said no, you might say, well, why not? And they could they could then say, I forgot. That would be totally, it would be totally acceptable. But that won't happen. So these are some of the things you have to learn to navigate. I'm not on my own in thinking this. I've spoken to many expats about the quirks of language. So you find yourself saying a lot of things like, if I say a word that intuitively I think that Beth may not understand, right? Especially if it's a colloquialism. Americans and British are notorious for speaking in colloquialisms. I once thought I could make an entire video using colloquialisms about teaching Filipinos to speak English. We could do it so easy, it would be a piece of cake. We could go the whole 9 yards, bend over backwards to tell them exactly how it should be. Just listen to me. I got all of the knowledge that you need. There's no need to go anywhere else. Don't talk behind my back. You understand, we can speak nonsense to a Filipina, wouldn't know anything about what we had said, but because of the nosebleed mechanism, they wouldn't say. So now, if I were to say, well, the word I just used, notorious, what? So, just in case, I'm trying to make myself understood. And if I'm using a word like notorious, it's probably quite important. I say, do you know the word, do you understand the word notorious? And Beth will say yes. So then, I know better. I say, what does it mean? And she'll say, I don't know. But in a Filipino way of looking at things, it is better to go past a word that you don't understand instead of being into the nosebleed and having to admit that you don't know what a word means. And then the struggle of understanding how your foreigner partner is going to explain it to you. Because in many cases, we don't actually know what the words mean ourselves. We have, sometimes if you ask someone what the meaning of this word is, if I'm reading a book like this, and then I say, what does culture mean? And you know what culture means, but you cannot for the life explain it. So then you say, what's the context? Give me the sentence. And then I would read out, well, culture, the culture gap is what can bring about misunderstandings. Yes, talking about the difference between one country and another. They each have their own culture, and the gap is how different they are. It wouldn't be an accurate definition of the word culture, but it would get them through what they needed to know. And some people have spent a great deal of money just going through words in the dictionary that they use regularly and don't actually know the perfect dictionary definition. Now, if it's a real discussion and I really need to know the meaning of something in order to be able to explain it to someone, I go to my dictionary and I look it up and I do what I have to make myself understand that word. So, how does this start to come between you? Well, if you've asked if something is done and you are then believing it is done, but it's not, you can see, if it was important, you can see how that would start to create areas of irritation or inability to agree with how the person deals with it without getting angry. Now, that would bring you up against, as a foreigner, that would bring you up against an absolute no-no when it comes to a Filipino. You must never raise your voice. You must never be confrontational with your partner in public, because you can bet your life you're speaking much louder than you think you are, so other people are listening, and they're listening out of a gossipy kind of interest as to what is happening between this foreigner and the Filipina, and they listen and they enjoy it. Now, if the Filipino, right or wrong, feels that you have raised your voice and told her off in public, you're in trouble. Depending on how much your Filipina is into, what is it called? Temper, I think it's called. It's very close to temper, and it's where our tempo, where the Filipino will go into a silent mood and will not speak. And no matter what you try to do to get them out, there's a time frame on it which must be served. A little bit like doing penance if you're a Catholic. Alright, so you go in and you confess your sins, and the Father will give you 10 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and off you go. You sit outside the confessional box and you say your prayers, and then you go home and everything's okay. There will become a moment where you will find out what it was that actually made your partner go silent, and it may be something that you are totally unaware of, where you didn't know you'd raised your voice. You were just talking to her. You were unaware of people standing around. And that's your mistake. So these are cultural differences as well, and you better learn them. If you want to have a happy Filipino, you better learn them. You better stop talking loud. Harder for the Americans than for the British, who tend to speak quieter than the average American. On some of my many trips to America before I went to live there, I would have spent maybe 2 weeks in America, and then I'd be coming home, and I would get onto the underground in London to get home, the tube, subway, and I would be suddenly aware of how quiet everything was. I would be able to hear. I'd look over and I'd see a man, and he'd be looking in his newspaper. This is in crowded rush hour traffic, and I would be able to hear the pages of the newspaper rustling. People would speak quietly. And if you go into, there's a place in LA which is a very popular 50s diner, and when you go in there, it's so loud, not with music, it's just so loud with people talking, and you feel like that you're the only one that wasn't invited to the party. You feel like a gatecrasher in a public restaurant, and there's just so much noise, so much people talking, laughing, loud, the whole thing. Going to the same type of thing, like, I don't know, Pizza Hut or McDonald's in the UK, by comparison, and I used to see these comparisons because I'd spent time in LA, and then I came back home, and I would see the incredible difference. So there's going to be even more of an incredible difference when you come to the Philippines. So my advice was, and I still believe that it was good advice, I think the first thing, if you're coming and you want to be part of everything, learn the language, and you've got to decide which language you're going to learn. But learn it properly, and then you'll be part of things, and people will open up to you incredibly if you've learned their language. I used to be able to, I remember once, which really brought it home to me in closing, I had to go to Tagbilaran. Beth had already been on by bus, and she had gone to Tagbilaran anyway, I got into the bus the next day, and I got into the bus, and people were very friendly, and I sat near where the conductor was, and he said, do you speak any Visayan? And I said, I speak a little. And then I said, Akong asawa guapa, which means I have a beautiful wife. And he said, I know, because she got the bus yesterday. So you're going to be missing an awful lot. Now the other thing that I always thought was a great idea was, come over, keep your mouth shut for the most part. Don't talk and give your opinion for 1 month. Be quiet, look, listen, learn, observe for a month. And then when you've realized that the Philippines is not going to change just because you arrived knowing everything, which is a transformation that happens to foreigners wherever they're from, coming from their land to this land, which usually they're running away from what used to be in their own country to the more laid-back life here, and it's worth it, and it's true. But they go through this transformation where even about things which they were not expert on in their own country, suddenly it's as if they know everything about it now that they're here. So they look at the building, and they look at this, and they look at that, criticize this, criticize that. I'm known, if anything, for being an expat basher, and I always found that this was very true and confirmed. Whenever I went to Tagbilaran, I would go to Tagbilaran and I would go and have a cup of coffee, and there'd be a party of expats, and they'd have their special table, and they'd all sit there, and they would all interact. Now, I know that every expat is online, and I know that they know all of the bloggers. None of them would speak to me because obviously they had been even briefly on my site, and they found out that I really don't want to listen to people criticizing the country and the people who have given them a home. So keep it shut for a little while and look and listen. The people here have something that is the prize in America. The pursuit of life. What is it? Pursuit of life and livingness and happiness. And that's something that is highly prized in America. And it's a common commodity here. I always say that there are more smiles per mile in the Philippines than anywhere else in the world. That's really is my sincere belief. Bye for now.